Hello everyone, this is KenBroTech from KenBroTech and welcome back to the channel. So in this two-part series video, we are building this Flask web application, and it's a very simple to-dos app. Now in the first part of the video, we looked at building the UI, the interface, and also setting up our Flask environment. So now in the second part, which is going to be a simple and shorter one than the first one, actually, we are going to see how we write the business logic to implement CRUD. So one of the first things we are going to look at is how we set up our database. And what we have over here, unlike Django will set us up with some kind of a default UI for our backend and stuff like that. Now Flask don't have that, so we need to kind of bring everything ourselves. We are going to install a third-party library in order to make us work with databases. So over here, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to stop the server, and I'm going to run an import over here or do an installation. So I'll do a pip install and I'll do flask -SQL alchemy, and I'll press enter to install this package. Now this package is going to help us set out our database and work with some kind of data. All right, so at this point, the installation of SQL Alchemy is done. Now we can do a pip list once again to check if indeed we have it over here, and clearly we can see that we have SQL Alchemy over here. So let me just come back here and do a Flask Run to run my application. Good. So having done this, now everything is going to work and we are good to go. So we have SQL Alchemy installed. Now we need to import it, and that's also very simple. So I'm going to say from flask _SQL Alchemy, I would want to import, and the class I need is SQL Alchemy. Good. Now this is working for me. In some of the trials I made whilst working, it was kind of having problems locating SQL Alchemy. Now when we have that, don't worry, just click on view, then you click on command palette, okay, then you select interpreter, you click on enter interpreter path, click on find browse, and go into your environment, go into scripts and select what you have over here as Python. Then you select interpreter and it is going to work for you. Okay, so now we have this working. Now we are going to work with this, but even before we do so, let's set out the environment properly. So over here, I'm going to say app.config. Now I need a configuration over here, and inside of this is going to be some kind of a dictionary that we are going to set out. So inside of this, I'm going to say SQL Alchemy, there's an L over here, underscore database underscore URI, and this is going to be equal to SQLite, the column 1 2 3 3/ over here, and I'll say SQLite.db. all right, so this is going to set out an SQLite 3db file inside of our environment, and this 3/ you have over here is simply telling us, or simply telling the system to put it in your root directory. So in here we are going to create in our database, and in order to do so, we are going to set an instance. So I'm going to say db, which is going to be the instance of our database, and I'm going to import the SQL Alchemy class we have created over here, and inside of this I'm going to pass in app, because this is the app objects we have for our Flask and everything revolves around it. So having done this, now we can create in our models or our database tables. So I'm going to say create models over here, and this is going to be a class. So I'm going to say class ToDo, and inside of a parenthesis I'll do db dot, there's a model class over here, and inside of this we are going to set out the attributes or the columns within our table. So the first of which is going to be the ID, and once again we are calling this DB, which we are getting from SQL Alchemy. I'm going to do db.column, and inside of a parenthesis I'm going to say db dot, and this is going to be the data type of the ID column. So the ID is going to be an integer, obviously, and I'm going to say primary underscore key. I'm going to set it to true. Good. So this primary underscore key will make this the primary key of will make this column, or will make this column the primary key of this table. Now the next thing we would want is to have the title, or the to do itself. So the title is going to be db.column, and inside of this I'm going to have db, and the data type I want is a string, and inside of this I'm going to pass in 100. So the maximum number of characters I want here is 100. Then the last one I'm going to have is complete, and this is going to be db.column, and I'm going to have db.boolean, and I'm going to set a default to false. So I'll save this, and what I've realized is normally when I type in default and import it over here, we have this and we don't need this. So I have this complete, and I have db.column and db.boolean, because this is going to be a yes or a no, a true or a false kind of data type in here. So now that we have this, we are good to go. We then need to bring our SQL stuff over here and work with this. So now the way we go about this is also very simple. Once again, let me just quench the server and work with this. So over here, I'm going to go into the Python shell. So I'll just type in Python. Now in here, I'm going to bring, or I'm going to import DB. Okay. So you can see that this DB is an instance of this class S, and it is inside of app.py. So I'm going to say from the name of my app over here, so from app, I would want to import DB, and I'll press enter, and it is giving me some warning. Let me do it again. From app, import DB. Good. So if you don't have any warning, then you are good to go. If you have warning, you have to just import it again. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say db.create_all and close it up this way. So this is a create all method, and this is almost similar to the migration that we normally do in Django. So now when I press enter, now look over here, the file is going to get created. Okay, if I'm to come back here, the SQL file is supposed to be created over here. Let me just come back and see. So clearly I made a mistake over here, and I think some of you might have seen this. So the database is supposed to be database and not what I typed. So I'll save this and let me start the process again. So let me just exit. So I'll exit and type in Python, and inside of this I would want to say from app, I would want to import DB. I'll press enter, and let me import it once again, and I'll do db.create_all and call this method over here. So once I press enter, you are supposed to have this SQLi3.db showing up over here. Good. In order to visualize things properly, I have a DB browser for SQLi3 or SQLite over here. Now I have a video on how to download and install, configure this application, and I'll leave the link in the description below. Now I believe having it this way and also visualizing things is going to help you understand things very well. So over here I'm going to click on open database, and I'm going to navigate through desktop. I have this Flask app over here, and I'll select this SQL file. So clearly you can see that I have this showing up over here, and you can see that it has created the to-dos table with this particular stuff over here. So I can now click on this, and when I do a right click and click on browse tables, you can see that, let me just open this up a little bit. You can see that we have the field for ID, for the title, and also whether it is completed or not. All right, so this is looking great. Now let's come back here and see how we can add things onto our database. So inside of our application, we are going to create a function. So I'm going to call this function add, and for add, I'm just going to return. So I'm just going to pass for now. So this add is going to implement the logic of adding things into our database, and this is also going to take in a route. So the route is going to be app.route, and inside of this I want to do a /add. Now there are other things I'm going to bring in here as we move along. So of course we are not just going to pass, we are definitely going to return some kind of a template. So over here I'm going to say return, and the return that I want over here is not going to render, or it's not going to return render templates, okay, but we are going to return redirect. And for redirect, we have it inside of Flask. Okay, so from Flask we would want to return redirect, and this is also same name and same functionality as we have with Django. So we want to return redirect onto another page after adding. Then also I would want to have in URL for. So this function URL for, it is exactly what we did when we were using this to return this. Okay, so when I click on home, I have this URL underscore for index, and that's the same logic we are going to imply over here. So inside of this return, then I'm going to say return redirect, and inside of this I would want to have a URL for, and I just want to redirect into the index page. So this is almost going to be like a refresh whenever I do the add. Good. So now there are some few things I'll need to explain over here. Let me close this, and also close this as well, and come inside of this. So inside of this, let me collapse this, in fact collapse everything I have over here, and go back into my first card. Okay, my first card where I had the statistics and I had this form over here. So inside of this to do form, remember I had this title over here, okay, or the name as title for the inputs, and this is where I'm going to type in whatever I need to type in, and that's exactly what I have over here. Okay, so there's a title, or there's a name title over here, and now I would want to grab this and grabbing whichever thing I type. So I want to say title is now going to be equal to, and once again I need to have an import over here, and this import is going to be request. Now request is one of the popular Python libraries we use for a number of things over here. So inside of request, or I'm going to say request.form.get, and I would want to get the title I pass in over there. So the name, so if the name I use over here was like title to do or to do title, I'll need to pass in the same thing over here. So basically what this does is I'm saying the request, okay, which we are going to understand, because at the end of the day we are going to pass in some request, and it's either going to be a post or get request. So the request or the form dot get, and I want to get a title and save it inside of this variable. So everything I type inside of that particular input type field is going to be stored in this variable. So after getting it, then what I can now do is I want to create a variable like new to do. So new to do is now going to be equal to the task. Now this task is a class. Sorry, this ToDo, I mean, it's going to be ToDo. So this ToDo is a class I have over here. Okay, so I have ToDo, and inside of this, I'll need to pass in the title. So the title is going to be this title I've created over here, and also the completed or the complete. The complete is going to be false. All right, so let me explain exactly what's happening over here. So you can see that for every item we put inside of our database, we need to provide a title and whether the complete is true or false. The ID is going to be the primary key, which is going to be auto-generated as and when we put things in our database. So what is happening here is when we create an instance of this class, as we have over here, we are passing in the title, which is going to be the title we are grabbing over here, and the complete we are setting it out to false by default, because upon creating a title or upon creating a ToDo, we don't want to have it as completed. Now what then we need to do after getting the new ToDo is to do a DB, and this DB is what we are getting from the instance we created from SQL Alchemy over here. So I'm going to do db.session.add, and what do I want to add? I want to add the new ToDo over here. So this new ToDo, which is the object being created out of this class based on these parameters or these things I'm passing in here, is going to be added. And finally I'll do db.commit. There's a commit method over here. So this is just about it. But one of the things I will need to do is also to pass in a method over here. So I'm going to say method, and let me do methods, and this method is going to be a list. So over here I'm only going to accept the post method. So I'm saying post over here, and I'll come inside of the index.html, and inside of the form, see that this is the form, I need to pass in the method of post. And finally I'll need to pass in the action is going to be the add function. So you see that there's a function add over here, and I need to pass in as the action over here, and the method is post. So now I'll save this, and if I come back here and come and refresh, our server is down. Okay, and that's because after doing this we didn't go back to this. So I'll do an exit over here, and I'll do a Flask Run. So our server is now running, and now when I refresh, yes, here we are. Now when I say, let's say learn Django as our first ToDo, when I click on add, we seem to have a problem over here. Say SQL Alchemy object has no attributes, commit. And then, all right, so the problem is we needed to do db.session.commit instead of just db.commit. So it's going to be the db.session.commit. So I'll save this, and let's come back, come and do a refresh. Okay, and now let's say learn Django, and now when I click on this, we can see that we don't have the problem now. But interestingly, if I'm to come back here and come and do a refresh, see that I have learn Django being added onto our database. Now let's do another one, and this time around I'll say learn Python the best way with KenBroTech. And now I'll do add. Good. And now when I come back to come and refresh from our database, we can see that we have learned Python the best way with KenBroTech. So clearly there's that connectivity between our front end and our back end, and everything is working perfectly. So this is looking good, and it is very simple over here. Good. So now we are done with the creating part of our CRUD. So now let's go to the reading part, and the reading part is essentially displaying what we have in our database showing up over here, and that's very simple to do actually. So in Django we use the ORM. Yes, Flask also has its own version of the ORM, and that's very simple. So over here inside of the index function, we can create a variable like to-do list, and to-do list we are going to write some kind of a query. So we can say to-do dot query dot all, and it's as simple as this. So to-do dot query dot all. So this is going to grab everything inside of our to-do table and put it inside of this to-do list we have over here, and we can now pass this as a parameter over here. So I'll do to-do is going to be equal to to-do. So this to-do is equal to to-do. This is a key value pair kind of a thing. So in here we can now have to-do inside of our templates, and it's going to be accessible inside of index.html. So we can now come into index.html, and this is where we have everything showing up. So first of all, let me just clear this. So I'll do a clear this and save it, and we'll just be left with one over here. So that's what we have. Now I want to do a looping through this. So the way and manner we loop through this is also very simple, and once again we are going to use the Ginger template tag. So in here I'm going to bring in the double curly brackets and the percentage sign. So I'm going to say for to do in the to-do list, the to-do lists we have over there, then just under this I'll say N4. So this is how we write a for loop over here. So I'm saying that for to do in to-do list, this is a to-do list we are passing over here. Okay, this is a to-do list, and this is a query we are grabbing everything and putting it inside of this variable to-do list. So we N4. So now if I just do this and save, because we have two items in our database, okay, because we have two items in our database, it's going to loop through and give us something like 2 items over here. So when I refresh, you can see that we have 2 items, but now we want to have the title and the IDs displaying over here, and that's very simple. We can do that by using this double curly brackets, and we only use this when we want to pass in data. So now I can do to-do dot ID, and in here I can do to-do dot title. So this dot ID and a dot title is also coming in from the names we chose over here. So the name was ID and the name was title, and because we are passing everything in here as the to-do list, and after looping through, this is a new variable we have created, to do. So when we do a to-do dot ID, we want to get the ID, and a to-do dot title, we want to get the title. So now when I save this and come back over here and come and refresh, now you can see that we have learn Django, and I also have learn Python the best way. So if I'm to say visit grandma, that's the new to do. You can see that I now have visit grandma showing up over here. If I'm to say meet client and save this, we can see that we also have meet clients over here. All right, so this is looking good. So we are done with the implementation of the create and the read. Now let's go to the update and the delete, and this is also very simple. So once again, we come back into our view where we are writing our business logic, and I think let's do the delete first, because the delete is very simple. So once again, let's have a function and let's call this delete, and inside of this, once again, let's do a return redirect, and we would want to do a URL for the index just as we did for the add. Now the route I would want over here is I would want to do an app.route, and I'll do inside of a string, I'll do a delete, and over here I also need to pass in the ID, or I would also want to identify what I want to delete with an ID. Okay, so the unique identifier over here is going to be the primary key, which is the IDs over here. So in order to do so, and if you are coming from Django, you'll be familiar with this, I'll do a slash, and I'll do an angle bracket over here, and I'll pass in an int, and I'll do something like ID. So this is going to be the ID. Now I'll need to pass the ID over here as a parameter, and now I'll want to write some kind of a query. So the to do that I want to grab is going to be to do, which is going to be from the class dot query dot, and I want to do filter underscore by, and I want to filter by the ID. So now the ID is going to be the ID I'm going to pass over here. So to do dot filter by this ID, and I'm going to do a dot first because I want to grab the first instance of it I have in that class, or I have in that table. So the next thing I'll do is, after grabbing this particular to do by the ID, now I can now do db.session. And remember, when I wanted to add something onto the database, there was an add method over here. Now if your guess is as good as mine, I want to delete, so there's going to be a delete, or there's actually a delete method in over here. And what do I want to delete? I'll just pass in the to do item over here. Now I'll do db.session, and I would want to commit this into my database. So now I'll save this, and there are some few things I would want to do over here. So I'll come back inside of my delete or my index.html. Then I'll go to where I have delete over here. The href, I'm going to point to the delete routes, or exactly the delete route I have over here, or the delete function in here. Then in addition to that, I would also want to grab that primary key. So you can see that if I do to do.id, I'm grabbing that primary key. So over here too, I'm going to do a double curly bracket, and I'm going to say to do.id, and I'll save this. So this is going to work, I believe. So now when I refresh, you don't seem to have any problem over here. Now pay attention. If I'm to, and once again, let me just come in here and refresh. So I have everything over here. Now I want to delete meet clients from the front end. So over here, let me refresh. So when I click on this delete, you can see that it is taken off from my system. Now let's come back here and come and refresh, and you can see that meet clients has been deleted. Now I would also want to delete, let's say, visit grammar and learn Python the best way with KenBroTech. And I'll click on delete. Now click on delete, and now when I come back and come and refresh, you can see that it is actually reflecting in our database. So clearly we've been able to implement the delete logic. And once again, let me go over. So this delete function, the route over here, so far the new thing we have introduced is with this particular ID, and we are grabbing the ID because we want to delete a particular item based on the ID. Remember, the ID is more or less the most unique identifier within the database. So we are passing in ID over here. Now that particular to do, we want to query it, we want to fetch it. So we are doing to do.query.filter by, we want to filter by the ID. So the ID is going to be equal to the ID, and we want to get the first one inside of it. Now when we do db, which is the database instance we have created from SQL Alchemy .session, then there's a method in there, delete. And what do you want to delete? We want to delete whatever thing we've queried over here. Now we'll do a db.session.commit, and it is actually going to commit that on our database. And finally, we'll do a return redirect and do a refresh back onto the index page. Now you can see that when we come into our index.html template, we inside of our href, the only thing we are changing over here, or we are adding, is bringing our delete route and also target it with that particular ID. And that's what we are passing over here. Bearing in mind, that's exactly what we did over here to show the ID. So finally, the last one is with the updates. So I'll do an app.route, and inside of this, I'm going to do a /updates and a slash. And once again, we want to update by a particular ID. So I'm going to grab the ID as I have over here, and I'm going to create in a function and I'll call this function updates, and I'll pass in the ID over here. Then I normally would want to do a return redirect, because that's essentially what I'm going to do. Return redirects and URL for, and I would want to redirect back to the index page. So in here, I'm also going to write in a query to grab that particular item I would want to update, and it is actually going to be same as this. So now let's do ToDo is going to be equal to our ToDo class dot query dot filter by, so filter underscore by, and I want to filter by the ID, so the ID is going to be equal to ID, and I'll do a dot first. Okay, so let me see if everything I have over here same as what I have in here. Okay, so everything is looking good. So this is what I want to do. I would want to have an instance where I'm going to say, so the ToDo dot complete, and because this is a boolean, if I do ToDo dot complete, it is going to say true. So if ToDo dot complete is not equal to ToDo dot complete, so this is going to work like a toggler. ToDo dot complete is not equal to ToDo dot complete, then I'm going to do db dot session dot commit. All right, so this is just going to be it. And now when I save this, I need to come in here and once again do a / updates and a / and I'm just going to bring this over here. So I'll do a Ctrl+C and paste this over here. Good. So this is what is going to happen. So what we can do here is, when I click on updates, we don't seem to have any change over here. And interestingly, if I come and refresh, you can see that it has now been updated to 1. So this is going to be a boolean 0101. And now if I come back here and come and click on update again and come back and come and refresh, you can see that we are back to 0. Okay, so this is looking great. Now how do we toggle this? And this is very simple actually. Let's go back into our index.html over here, and that's what we have over here. So we are going to bring in some kind of logic to change the color of the badge. So I'm going to put out once again my template tag, and I'm going to say if ToDo dot complete, if ToDo dot complete, then I would want to have this, but I would also want to have an else block over here, and finally I would want to have an end if. Then I'll copy this and I'll do a Ctrl+C, do a Ctrl+V over here, save this, and I'll change this badge to secondary. So I'll save this. So basically this is what I'm saying. I'm saying that if ToDo dot is complete, and because this is boolean, it's just going to be yes or no. So if this is true, then the badge I want to display should be of the background success. That's a green badge. And if or else, which is the opposite, it should be of the secondary badge, and I'll just want to change this to uncompleted. So incomplete. Good. So let me do uncompleted, and I'll say completed. Good. So that's exactly what's happening over here. So if I'm to come back here and come and refresh, you can see that I have uncompleted because it is uncompleted, and as you can see it is 0 over here. Now if I'm to come back here and click on this, you see that it is now completed, and the status has also changed to 1 over here. So now let's create in more to do. So I'll say learn Flask. Finally we are learning Flask. So once it is created, it is not completed, and when I update, it is completed, uncompleted, I can delete, and so on and so forth. So this is good. Now the next piece of thing we would want to do is to write in the logic to reflect the calculations we have over here, and that's a very simple thing to do. So now let's come back into our index page, okay, our index route, and this is where we are rendering the index page, and this is where we put out all the logic. So let's have a total underscore to do. So the total to do is going to be equal to the to do dot query, and over here there's a count method over here. So when I do to do dot query dot count, it is going to count everything I have and put it inside of this variable. Now the question is, how do we get this variable total to do inside of this? Now there are several ways of doing this, and I'm going to show you the hard way and also the easy way out. So let me just collapse this because the hard way is going to be a little bit hard. So I can now do a Control C, and in addition to this, do a Control V over here. So total to do is now going to be equal to total to do. So I can pass in as many elements I have over here. Okay, so total to do is going to be equal to total to do. Now when I save this and come back into my index.html, I need to find where I have those cards. Okay, so the total is now going to be inside of this double curly bracket, and I'm going to say total to do. So I'll save this, and now when I refresh, clearly my total to do is 1 because I only have one entry over here. Let me add in another one. Let's say back again, learn HTML. So when I add this, you can see that it is now updated to 2 because it is counting everything inside of the database. When I say visit school, we can see this over here. Now when I delete, you can see that it gets updated as well. Good. Now let's see how we do the complete and uncompleted. So with the completed and uncompleted, we can also come in here and write in a logic to implement that. So first of all, let's do completed. So I'm going to say completed underscore to do, okay, is going to be equal to the to do class. We are grabbing everything over there, dot query dot filter underscore by. And what do you want to filter by? You want to filter by the complete. Okay, if it is completed, then the complete is now going to be true. So I want to filter by complete. Complete is equal to true. Then I would want to do a dot count because I want to count everything over there. And once again, I'll need to bring this over here. And like I said, this is a hard way. I mean, it doesn't look clean. You may end up getting some mistakes somewhere, but at the end of the day, it is going to work. Okay, so the completed to do is going to be equal to completed to do. Now we'll come back here, and inside of completed, we'll bring in a double curly brackets because we want to pass in data, and I'll bring in completed to do like this. So I'll save this, and when I come here and come and refresh, we seem to have a problem over here. So it says entity namespace for to do has no property compete. So definitely there's a typo somewhere. So the typo is exactly what we have over here as compete. So it's going to be complete. It should be the same name as we have over here. So I'll save this, and this error should now go. So now you can see that's the completed, as you can see, is 1 over here. Now when I update this, the completed has now changed to 2. Now when I update this, it goes to 1, and now it is 0. Okay, so now the total and the complete is working. Now you can see that doing this way is a waste of everybody's time. Okay, now there's a simple way of handling this, and that's very simple actually, and we just do and unpack this over here. So I'm going to do a double star, and I'll say locals. So these locals I have over here, no, just 1 star locals. These locals I have over here is going to unpack all the local variables I have in here, and they are going to reflect So now when I do this and save and come back here and refresh, we seem to have a problem over here. So it's supposed to be a double star. So star locals to unpack this. So now when I refresh, we don't seem to have any problem over here. Now, if your guess is as good as mine, then we can have also something for a global variable. And this is very important. In fact, this is actually a Python way of doing things. So what this locals is doing is it looks at all the local variables within this function and it will unpack it. So the names we use over here is the names we are going to use inside of our template, because we are passing it through this locals unpacking over here. Okay, so we don't need to worry about the number of things we bring over here. So now if I'm to do uncompleted underscore to do, and over here we can just do a mathematical operation. So this is going to be the total to do minus the completed to do. And once again, I don't need to worry myself. All I need to do is to grab this uncompleted to do a Control C, save this, and bring it over here. So I'll bring in the double curly brackets and I'll do a save over here. So now when I refresh this, you can see that this is reflecting because we have two uncompleted over here. Now when I click on update, there's that reflection showing up over here. So you have two to-dos over here. So let me say meet parents as my next to-do or the next task. You can see that clearly it is uncompleted. So this gets updated to 2. We have 1 completed and the total is 3. And I'll see do homework. The same logic is applying over here. Now the moment I update this, everything reflects. When I delete, it gets reflected, and when I update, you can see that everything is working over here. Good. So this is looking good. Now this is just by way of educational purposes. So we can also have some global variables over here, and I just want to show you this. So let's say we have a global variable, and a global variable is going to be outside the scope of any function, so that then it becomes global. It can be accessed in any part of our code. So let's say we have x is equal to 10, and now I have y is equal to, let's say, a variable called Ken. Now if I want to have access to these global variables inside of this index.html, I can now change this to globals like this. So globals. Now when I save this and come back over here, we don't seem to have this showing up over here, and that's simply because we are not getting those variables in here, because this is now a global variables. Now if I'm to come in here, okay, and for instance where I have statistics inside of my index.html, where I have statistics, I decide to have access to the global variables. I can pass in, let's say, x. Now remember what x is. X is 10. So now after saving this, when I come back and refresh, you can see that I have 10 over here. If I'm to pass y, in which case y is Ken, I'm to pass in y and save, and I'll come back over here and refresh, you can see that I have Ken over here. So yes, this is the global variables and the locals variables. So the global variables is going to be accessed anywhere, and the locals is going to be within the scope of that function. So this is looking great, and we could have even accessed the global variables inside of the this particular function. So this is looking great, and now when I come back here and refresh, everything is looking wonderful. Now I would want to do something quickly over here, and that's a very simple thing to do. So let's say I delete everything I have in here, and let me bring back the statistics because things are beginning to look a little bit funny. So let me bring back statistics over here. So let me save this, and here we are. Good. So currently we don't have anything within our database. Okay, let me refresh. We don't have anything in here. Now I want a situation where if you don't have anything over here, then something begins to show as I demonstrated. And the way we go about this is very simple. So before we get our list showing up like this, we can, for instance, bring in an H1 and let's say no to do, and save this. And now when I refresh, you can see that I have no to do. Now if I add in new to do as my new to do over here, I have a new to do, but then this is still showing, and that's simply because we need to write some kind of a logic to make this disappear whenever there's a to do. Good. Now the way we are going to go about this is very simple, and even before we go through that, let me just bring in the HTML tag that kind of scrolls this up over here, and this is going to be the marquee HTML tag. So inside of this marquee HTML tag, I'll say no to do in database ... create new to do in to do form. So now when I save this and come back and come and refresh, this is exactly what we have over here. Okay, so this is just going to flash out anytime there's a new to do. And what I want to do over here is I just want to have a class and kind of do a margin top of, let's say, 3, and let me see exactly how this will pan out. Okay, so this is looking good, and let me change the display or the font size. So I'll do a display -3 as well. So when I do a display, that this is actually a bootstrap class, so this is going to change the font size, and once I refresh, that's exactly what you have over here. It's looking very big. Let me do a display -5, and good. So this is looking great. Now when I do learn Django as a new to do, it is still showing up over here, but I want it to go off immediately. I have a to do in here, and this is very simple. The way we go about it is we need to wrap this up in a logic. Okay, so I'm going to say that if what I have over here as, let's come back here, if what I have over here as the total to do, if the total to do is 0, then there's nothing in there, so that should show. Else then show whatever you need to show. So if the total to do is equal to 0, now display this, and I just want to have an end if over here because there's not going to be any other thing apart from this. So let me just put out a break tag over here for my case. Good. So all that I'm trying to say is if the total to do is equal to 0, then show this, then you end the if, and this is going to show up over here. So now when I refresh this and come back and come and refresh, now we have a to do, so nothing is showing. Now when I delete, it says that this is showing up over here because the total to do is 0. Now when I add in a new to do, why do I keep typing to do? You can see that it goes off, and now the total to do is 1, the uncompleted is 1. Let's add another one, learn CSS. We have this showing up over here. We can update, we can delete, and we can update again. It changes, the statistics takes effect, and now finally when we delete, this shows up over here. All right, so this is going to be the end of this video. Now if you have any question, kindly drop it out in the comment section and I'll be glad to respond to you. Now if you find this tutorial valuable and you found value in this video, now kindly help me out by subscribing to KenBroTech, to my channel, and also don't forget to share this video with friends and family who find this content very useful. At KenBroTech, we say learn programming, you can do it. Then also, before I forget, we have this inside of my GitHub repo, and you can have access to the code over here. So I'll also leave this link in the description below, and you can have access to the code. So here we have this app.py, and everything I have done in terms of the implementation of the code is exactly what you find over here. All right, so thank you very much for your time, and catch you in the next video. Bye bye.